All right. Thanks, Sue. Let me start now. One second. Okay, I think we only have one person here. Okay, let me just start. Share the entire screen. Oh no, not this one. One second. All right. Um, 1 minute. Let me pop out the window. All right. Awesome. Okay. So my name is Ugenteraan, and like what Sue has introduced earlier, I am currently working as a senior AI engineer, but more specifically on computer vision. I'll be introducing myself in a minute. Um, so today the topic that we are gonna talk that I'm gonna be talking about is about corporate culture, startup hustle, and basically how to grow your career in the tech world specifically. All right. Um, so a little bit about me before I go on any further. I have a total about 8 to 9 years of experience so far. Um, Now during this experience of 8 to 9 years, I've worked for startup companies. I've worked for corporate companies, and I freelanced for many different companies, both domestic companies and also overseas companies. Um, Among those years of experience, I've also served as a CTO in a startup company for 1 year exactly, and I have freelanced for a US company. And for my master's, I published 2 research papers, and I also do have about more than 50 personal projects in my GitHub. Um, to give you an overview about my experience on startup and corporate, I worked my first 5 years in a startup company, in the same startup company. And while I was working for 5 years in that company, I've freelanced for multiple different startup company mainly. Um, and after that, I joined a corporate company for 2 years, namely Celcom DG. And I've also had the opportunity to work with a lot of other corporate companies during that time, and now I'm in a startup company back again. All right. So I will be going with you guys about those personal projects later. So before that, let me just introduce a little bit about the US company that I worked for. So this is purely a freelance job, and it's a startup company based in San Francisco. Um, the company is about um, it's a medical company, and it's about um, treating illnesses, rare diseases among mainly infants, right? So my job there was as a computer vision engineer, and I worked with them for almost 1.5 year. And their main client was a company called Reckitt. So they are very big pharmaceutical company in US, and the project that I was doing for was a prototype for allergy research, right? So with that being said, let me just quickly jump into the main topic of today's talk, right? So let's talk about the difference um, between the startup and corporate in each one of these aspects, right? So the first aspect that I would always like to talk about is the motivation. Okay, now when you can understand the motivation of anything, of a company, of people, of a project, um, or even anything at all, you would be able to figure out mostly what to do next for you to be able to successful, or for you to be able to understand your failures. Okay, so in terms of the companies, the startup company and also the corporate companies, their motivations might seem similar, but at the same time they are not so identical, right? Now, let me put it into perspective for you. As a startup company, let's say you founded a company, right? And your main motivation is about keeping the company alive, right? So in most cases, unless you have been given like millions of dollars or billions of dollars as a fund, you are probably going to be scraping for money. You're gonna be chasing deadlines uh, to please the investors, and most of the time your money is gonna be very tight. Your resources is gonna be very tight. So you're gonna have to hustle, right? So the main motivation at that time is to keep your company alive. Okay, so I'll get back to this later why I'm saying this, but for now, keep that in mind. Okay, but as a corporate company, the game is very different. Now the game is all about stocks. The game is all about growth. Now you don't have to scrape for money anymore. Obviously, you're gonna have a lot of investors. Um, you're gonna have a lot of employees. You're gonna have a lot of money and profits raking in. I'm talking about the most common cases, not the one that's going bankrupt. Okay, but in those cases the motivation is all about growth. It's all about it's still about pleasing the investors, but it's not in the same way as a startup company does. In this case, the pleasing the investors means cutting costs, cutting inefficient stuffs, and also uh, increasing the stock price of the company. Okay, so these are the main motivations of both of these different companies. Now again, I will get back to this later, but just bear these two things in mind. All right, now let's talk a little bit about people. Okay, now when we talk about people, I'm not just talking about your colleagues. I'm talking about the managers, I'm talking about the C-level people, and of course I'm talking about the investors as well. Okay, now in a startup company, the people are very less, right? If you're lucky, you're gonna get like 30 or 40 people. That's as much as you can get in a startup company. If you're very, very lucky, you might get something around 100 people. But in most cases, you're gonna have somewhere around 20 to 30 people. Um, and even in some rare cases, you might have people less than 10 number of people, right? So in those cases, in startup companies, um, you're gonna not have a lot of politics. Okay, politics gonna be very less. People hating on each other, um, people deceiving each other. Those things are gonna be very less, right? People fighting for certain promotions and all those things. I'm not saying that that's not gonna be there, but it's gonna be very, very less. Okay, and generally people in startups are more down to earth, and they are always focused on their task. Okay, they sometimes won't even have the time to talk to you. All right, so that's the kind of people that we are dealing with there. And in um, most startups there is no hierarchies at all. Okay, what I mean by there's no hierarchy is, if you feel like you want to talk to the CEO because your salary is not in, you can go and talk to him. That's the startup culture, right? So if you feel like the CEO is making a certain decision, or the CTO is making a bad technical decision, you can actually go and talk to him. Because that it's no most of the time there's not going to be a manager, or there's not going to be some sort of a project manager that's going to be in between you and the C-level people. It's mostly a flat hierarchy, and that's how it's going to work. And because of these things move very fast in startup cultures, right? And people are mostly going to be swamped with loads and loads of task, right? um, Other than that, about the friendliness of people, or about the willingness to help and all, depends on the individual and depends on the company. I've been around the both ends of that spectrum. In some startup companies, people are not even willing to look at your faces, and in some startup company, people are just so close to you, they just help. They're just so helpful and respectful to you. So I wouldn't want to comment on those kinds of area, because I believe that it's really depend on on the factors such as your companies and the demographics of the people in the startup, right? Now, as for the corporate, it's gonna be a bit different, and uh, there are some common attitudes and common ways of people behaving in all corporates. And I know this because I have a lot of friends that works at corporate, or at least worked in corporates. And also I've worked closely with multiple corporates together before this as well. So this is my experience so far. I could be wrong, because my brother works in an MNC company and his experience is much different than mine, right? So I'm gonna talk about the Malaysian corporate companies and not MNC companies in this case. So in corporate companies, the uh, the people that we have as colleagues, that we have as our seniors, that we have in our team or juniors, these people are generally friendly. All right. And the reason for that is because in most corporate companies you would not be swamped with a lot of tasks. I'm talking about most corporate companies. There are some corporate companies that make you work like hell, but we'll get back to that later. All right. So in most companies there's not going to be many tasks, and therefore you're going to have a lot of time to connect with people and to talk with them and so on and so forth. And plus you're going to also have a lot of team bonding activities, um, some areas for you to mingle around, like for example in the Salcom Digi that I worked with, there's a place where they have a free PS5, so people just go there to take a break, and people just mingle around on that spot. Whereas in a startup company, that's going to be quite rare unless it's a co-working space, and unless the startup company is rich as hell, right? Now, as for the managers and C-level people, there's gonna be hierarchies in corporate. It's not gonna be as easy for you to be able to meet even your HOD, even your head of departments, or head of sections, or whatever hierarchical ways that your company is organized. Um, it's gonna be quite easy to meet your own boss, your immediate boss, because obviously that's just one layer ahead. But it's not gonna be quite hard for you to meet above that one level boss. Even if you can meet one level above your boss, it's gonna be harder and harder as you go above, right? So to meet a C-level people is not gonna be not gonna be easy at all. And even if you are able to meet them, you will not be able to get their time. Now, there's some pros and cons with it. Obviously, the cons is you can't get to talk to them about your concerns and all. But one pros of it is that everything is abstracted away, right? So what I mean by that is you are not burdened by the company's motivation, or by the company's end goal, such as in startup, right? Because you always talk to your CEO and CTO in startup, you will always feel the same fear and the same kind of anxiety that your CTOs or the CEOs are experiencing, because they always will talk to you about the investors and so on. So that kind of things will be abstracted away in a corporate. Um, no, that's so far about the people. Now let's take a look at learning opportunities, right? So as I said, in corporates, the workloads are going to be less, and because there's a lot of hierarchies and bureaucracies, um, you're going to end up with a lot of inefficiencies. Okay, what I mean by that is, see, in startup, let's say you have a project for a client and you have to make a change in the requirement for some reason, right? For some valid reason, let's say. In a startup, it's very easy because you get to talk to your CTO and immediately you get to talk to your client, and that's it, done. You can change your requirement and you can start working on it in the next hour or next 2 hour or so. But in corporate, if you're gonna have to change your requirement, you're gonna have to go through multiple levels of people. You're gonna have to go to your manager. Maybe your manager is on leave. Now you're gonna have to wait for him to come back. And once the manager comes back, you report to him. He reports to his manager, and that manager goes to the client. It's just that one single process can take sometimes months, right? So a lot of projects gets backtracked or backlogged because of these kind of inefficiencies. Um, and therefore the learning opportunities are very less in corporates, right? And in most of the cases in corporates, those people that are at the higher up in the chain are normally the older generations, right? Because they tend to favor the experienced ones to get those to be in those positions. Now because of that, they might be outdated as well, right? So they might not know all the latest technologies and so on. And so they can't guide you in a lot of ways, as opposed to a startup company where it's mostly going to be filled with young people. It's You will be lucky to even see someone with 35 years old and above, right? So that's startup culture. And in those kind of culture, everybody's focused a lot on tasks, so you're going to have an ample amount of learning opportunities, but just bear in mind your workload is also going to be increased, right? And because of that, innovation is also much better in startups compared to corporates. Okay, there's no debate around it. Startups are very very fast, and therefore they can just keep on innovating things, even though it's not profitable or it's not viable or sustainable or whatever. But whereas corporates, they just pour millions of ringgit or sometimes even billions of ringgits into a certain effort, like for example, let's say AI. So they're just gonna be keep on pouring these millions and millions of money into it, but they might not be able to see any result at all. That's mainly because of all the inefficiencies and all the people that you have to pay along the way, right? um, so yeah, again, innovations is kind of hard to come by in corporates. In most cases, corporates are always like at least 5 or 10 years behind us, the latest startup companies. um, Now let's talk a little bit about yourself in both corporate and startup, right? Increment and promotions. To get increments and promotions in a corporate company is rather hard, all right? Especially promotions. To get promotions in a corporate company, you're gonna have to do something really, really outstanding, and most importantly, you need seniors and managers that are able to recognize your hard work. If you have a lousy manager who takes all your work and take credit for himself or herself, then yeah, you're not gonna be able to get promoted in this lifetime. But in startup, it's a bit different because there's very less people, and because there's no all this bureaucracy. Everybody will see what contribution you have made to the company. Let's say you are the best programmer in your company, and because of you, 5 or 6 projects has been closed successfully. Everybody will be able to see your effort, and therefore the company is not going to let you go as easily as a corporate, right? Let's say if you assuming that you want to change company, whereas they might even ask you to stay and give you a promotion, right? So that's one of the way how I became the CTO in my previous startup company, because I was able to contribute a lot to the company, and I became a senior after 4 years. And after 1 year of becoming a senior, I was straight away promoted as a CTO for the next 1 year. um, so like I say, the promotion is easier to come by, provided that you put in your hard work and effort. As for increment, that's very subjective. If your startup is able to pay you, then I would say um, the increment comes more often in a startup than a corporate. Whereas in a corporate, they have these very rigid rules that they have to follow. So it's gonna be based on the KPI that you have achieved, and at most, from what I've gathered, they're gonna give you 3% or 4%. That's the level of that's the level of increment that they're gonna give. Even if you are like the best performing employee, it's not gonna be more than 5%. Now, if your salary is 3,000, 5% from it is just 50 150 ringgit. So you're gonna be working there for one whole year, and you're gonna be getting 150 ringgit as a promotion. So it's to me, it's not worth it at all, right? So I know it sucks, but it is the way it is in corporates. I'll tell you about how to make those increments matter later, but for now, that's about how it works, right? The second thing is about the career growth. See, before we go into the career growth, earlier I told you guys about the motivation, right? So, like I said, for corporates, their main motivation is to cut losses, cut inefficiencies, and increase their stock prices. And therefore, they do not have much incentive in their mind for them to innovate better, or for them to provide learning opportunities better, or for them to even provide increments better, right? Because they could not do all this and yet still increase their stock by many other different ways, right? Whereas for a startup, it's much different. They're trying to survive. They need to show something to the investors in order for them to go big. And for that, they have to innovate. They have no other choice. They're gonna have to innovate, and they have to retain their employees, and therefore the promotions and increment if they found a good employee, and therefore the learning opportunities comes automatically as well. See how the motivation is connected to everything else, right? So that's how I normally put things into perspective. When I know the motivations of something or someone, it's kind of easy to predict their behaviors and other nuances that comes along with it. Okay, so now next off is about the growth, career growth. Um, See about the career growth. Um, like I said, career growth comes mostly through the projects that you have done, right? So if you have done like some remarkable projects, then when you want to get a promotion, that's easier. When you want to get an increment, that's easier. And when you want to go to the next company, it's much easier as well, right? Because you have done some remarkable projects in this company. Why wouldn't you put that in your CV to get a better job next time, right? And with better pace, obviously. Now, because of that, you will have much better career growth in a startup compared to corporate. That's a no brainer, actually. It's a it is what it is now. It's there's how do I put this in? uh, I know that there are some exceptions as well, but in most cases, that's the way it is, right? So, a career growth from a startup is much better than a corporate. Again, it comes back to all the reasons that we have discussed about so far. Now, let's talk about the last piece, the benefits. See, the benefits is undeniably a lot better in a corporate company. All right, obviously the corporate company has a lot of money, and they would give you all this medical insurance, dental insurance. Some even go as far as giving you um, what do we call it, the spectacles allowance, but to buy glasses, to buy hardwares. Some even gives you money to buy laptops, or even to take mortgage on houses and stuff like that. Now, make no mistake, they're not giving this all to you because they are very kind, or they are very rich and they're just giving it back to you. No, but it's mostly because they can write off the tax, right? um, by giving this all to employee, they don't have to pay this to the government, and they get to retain some good employees and also get good names for the company, which would obviously increase the stock prices at the end. Again, it goes back to the motivations, right? So whereas in a startup company, it's a bit different. You're gonna be lucky if you get a medical insurance. I'll be honest with you, and mostly it's because startups do not have that much of money lying around, right? They don't have that much of revenue coming in, unless it's a big startup that with a lot of investments. Then yes, it's possible. But so far, in like 4 or 5 startups that I've worked with, um, I only gotten medical insurance in one, right? And allowance, mostly they will just give you allowance every month for you to do whatever you want with that allowance, because the insurance is much higher to pay than an allowance. So as of now, what I've talked about is the difference between the corporate and startup in multiple aspects. um, there are some people who wants to go to work just to earn the money and then go back home and do whatever they like, right? They might want to spend time with family, they might have other hobbies, or they might have other side hustles, whatever. That's fine. Some people go to work because that's part of their identity. That's how they find meaning in this world. They actually want to do something useful. They want to contribute. They want to learn and grow. That's fine as well. It's just two different types of people. I don't see any reason why we should look down on one, we should glorify the other. No such thing. If you like to work, work. If you don't like to work, you just work there for money, no problem, do it. But don't do wacky jobs, right? That's a different story altogether. Now, I think I've covered different aspects of it that pertains to both groups of people, uh, as in terms of all these benefits, motivation, learning opportunities, and innovations as well, right? If you guys have any questions, you can just stop me and ask the questions, all right? All right. So now let's talk about career growth. So we have put in some foundation, put in some roots on what are the difference between those two types of companies. Now we're gonna take a look at how do we actually uh, make ourselves better financially and also in terms of our learning opportunities, right? So uh, here are some list of tips and tricks on how to increase your salary and also how to get better jobs in the long run. Okay, so before we go into that, let's look at human resource motivation. Okay, because most of the time when you are in an interview, um, at least in one stage of those interviews, you are going to talk to a human resource, and they are the one that's going to decide how much salary you should be getting, not your manager. Your manager can recommend to the HR, this person is worth this much, blah blah blah, whatever. But if the HR doesn't agree, then the negotiation is not gonna go anywhere. Okay. Now, because of that, let's look at what does the HR is actually looking for and what do they actually want. Okay. Now, let's imagine for a second you are working as an HR. Okay. Now you would have your own KPIs, you would have your own seniors, you would have your own managers, okay? And you are responsible for some financial decisions, for some financial um, losses or profit that the company is gaining. All right. So, in from your perspective, your main motivation is to make the company as valuable as possible. Okay, whether it be by brand or whether it's be by monetary. Okay, so when you are hiring someone, right? So let's say you are the human resource and you're gonna hire an engineer, a senior engineer, let's say, for this particular position. Now the budget, the maximum budget, let's say, is 10,000 ringgit. Okay, if you are able to get someone very valuable, okay, now how do you define valuable is by the years of experience, by by their previous drawn salary, and by their whatever project that they have worked on, by their certification available, uh, by their achievements. Okay, so that's how they gauge the uh, value of a person, right? So imagine you are an HR person, you are hiring someone for the senior role, right? So if you are able to get someone very valuable for a less amount of money, let's say this person could have gotten like 15,000 if he wanted to, but for whatever reason, he's okay with, like, let's say 8,000 or 9,000 per month. All right. If you're able to get someone at that level for that much of money, your KPI is met because you have done a great service to the company. You have hired someone very valuable that would potentially increase the company's revenue, and at the same time, you are not overpaying for that person. That's a win for you. All right, so that's how the KPI is mostly met for human resource. I know it's not explicitly stated that way, but that's how it runs there. um, Even if they are able to cut some of those existing employees, that's a KPI win for them as well, right? So that's why it's very hard for you to be able to communicate with HR teams in terms of technicalities, um, because their KPI is much different than us. I'm not saying that they are bad or evil people at all. It's just that their motivation is totally different, right? They're still good people in HR. I've met some wonderful people in HR as well, right? But that's their motivation. Um, and because of that, right, you have to make yourself valuable so that you can negotiate with the HR. Okay, now the question becomes, how do you make yourself valuable? Like I said earlier, they look at your previous drawn salary, they look at your years of experience, they look at your last position, what company you have worked for previously, uh, your portfolio, your projects, if you have done some freelance, um, maybe your LinkedIn profile, how active you are. Some companies do look at that because they want their company's name uh, to be promoted even further. So if you're an influencer, by all means, they might even hire you. So yeah, those kind of things, right? So because of that, okay, there are some aspects over here that you can control, there are some aspects you can't. Years of experience, no. The company that you work with, somewhat, maybe. Last round salary, somewhat, maybe. If you start with something very bad, then it's not your fault, right? um, but you can control your projects, your portfolio, and your freelance projects that you have worked with. Now, about the portfolio, right? What does that actually mean is a portfolio is just basically like a CV, basically all your achievements, all your certifications, and so on and so forth. Now, that's one of the reason why if you land a job in corporate, make sure to use the resources there to take extra additional courses like AWS certificates, cybersecurity certificate, or whatever that pertains to your field, right? If you're a software engineer, go by all means go get um, some Scrum certificate. If you're a project manager, or AWS certificate if you're a cloud manager, and so on and so forth. Now, most of the time, if you're on a corporate, those courses will be there for you for free. All right. Whereas if you do it yourself, you're gonna have to pay maybe even up until 10K sometimes, right? So might as well just make use of it. Now, the second thing is projects. As for the projects, what I mean by that is your personal projects. Okay. So earlier I told you guys that I will come back to it. In my case, I have most of my personal projects in my GitHub, as you can see here. Let me show you. Okay. Okay. So as for me, I've been doing all these projects since I was 23 years old, since about 8 9 years ago. So I don't know how many repositories that I have, but normally what I do is I pick a topic that I'm interested in, and I will just go ahead and implement them, and I put all the results here. Like for example, the latest one that I've done is Mascoto encoder PyTorch, right? So this was from a paper by Meta. When I read that research paper, I was very interested in it, and therefore I went and implemented it by myself. Took a few months to do it because I was doing it in my free time. I took my own time to do it, and I put in all the results over here. And up until now, if I'm in an interview, or if I'm even talking to some people about machine learning's AI and whatsoever, if I get the chance, I will show them my projects, and I will explain to them about this project. Now, that's how you basically promote yourself, right? See, you're not promoting yourself in any malicious way or any bad intention. You have done something good or okay, and now you're just showcasing it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be arrogant or you have to be boastful about it, but just show it in an informative way, right? And people would normally appreciate those kind of things. So I do all these projects in my free times, and I keep it all in my GitHub so that it's freely available for people to scrutinize. Like for example, in my deep hierarchical classification, I've done this project some years ago, and again, I'm not a perfect coder, and therefore there was some problem in one of the line that I myself didn't notice, but there was someone who noticed, and then they put this out over here. And from there, you can learn. That person can learn, and everybody's happy. And that's how a community is being built, right? So that's one way. Uh, Again, to have personal projects, right? Again, these personal projects is where you get to play around. You can choose some topic that you might not ever have a chance to work in for your company, for you to be able to do it yourself, to get that fulfillment and satisfactions as well. And then once you have that in your GitHub, you can use it during interviews, you can put it in your CV, and you can even showcase it to people in a casual manner as well, right? And the third one is freelance. As for freelance, um, it's a bit subjective because um, how do I put it? To do freelance, you're gonna need a lot of network. Okay, For me, when I was doing freelance in the beginning, I got cheated a lot because I didn't have anyone that I can rely on. So I was just going around and looking for all those freelance. And for the first one or two projects, I got cheated quite badly. I lost some money and so on and so forth. But from there, I learned, right? I learned how I should have put my contract, how I should have dealt with those people, and I got better at it. So then I started to gain proper networks, proper people, and once I've done a very good job on one freelance job, you will automatically get multiple others because they will keep on calling you even when you are not looking for those freelance jobs, right? um, as for the US job, I got it through something called angel.co. It's a website. This one, well found. So you can log in and you can start discover. Yeah, so you can start discover those people who are seeking for uh, hirings. But be mindful because there's a lot of scammers here. All right, so you might not think about it, but there is a lot of scammers here. So I was partially lucky to have found the US job through here. um, so I wouldn't recommend this freelance to everybody. Only if you have a lot of free times and you are willing to go through that risk of getting cheated, go for it. But it's worth it, I would say, because those first few experience that I've gained through getting all this scam was kind of like a bedrock to me to know what is real and what is not, what is authentic and what is not, even up until today. Even up until today, I'll still sometimes get some offers for freelance jobs, but the way they talk in the first interview or the first meeting itself, you'll be able to gauge if this person is for real or not, right? Um, so far, I have done a total about 7 or 8 freelance projects. Some of it for Malaysian companies, and one of it is for overseas company. There was one for Singapore as well, but the Singapore one didn't really wasn't really completed. Now, my tips for you is when you're looking, if you are gonna go look for this freelance path, you're gonna need a lot of networks. Okay, we will come back to that network later, but basically you're gonna need a lot of people, and what you're gonna need before people is the projects over here and your portfolio, your certifications and so on. When you have a lot of projects in your GitHub and when you're looking for those freelance projects, you will be able to convince them much better than if you do not have any projects. You get me? So for example, um, the mask auto encoder earlier, right? So the mask auto encoder is a deep learning network that is able to learn without labeled data. So it still need data, but it doesn't require labels. Now, it's something quite fairly new. It's quite recent. So if I'm talking to someone who wants to do a project in the medical industry, I know that the medical industry has a lot of data, but they do not have people to label those data, right? So I can now convince them to give me that job by using this SSL that I've implemented and show them all the result. It's much better. It puts me in a much better position than all the other people who wants the same freelance project as well, right? So again, to get a freelance project, you're gonna need the portfolio and projects so that you can better convince those people to give you the freelance projects. Okay, now um, this also related to these three, but I will come back to that in a bit, right? So one more thing that I should mention about freelance is that one more trick is that if you somehow land a freelance project, you want to negotiate an incremental payment, or they call it a progressive payment in some time in some context. So what does this mean is that, let's say you are about to build a huge website for this client, right? Now this website can be broken down to multiple chunks: login, sign up, profile, commenting, whatever, right? So you have all these different features. So what you want to deal with the customer is, or the client is, you want to give a proper timeline, and you want to quote a price for each one of those timeline. For example, let's say it takes 1 week for you to implement that login and sign up feature. You put that in your documents, in your it's called STS. Actually, it's called software development something. But in most cases we just use the term contract, right? So you just want to put those things in contracts, that the first week you're gonna develop this thing over here and you're gonna get a payment of 3,000 for it. The second week you're gonna develop this other feature and you're gonna get a payment of 1,000 for it, and so on. So in that way, uh, you don't have to finish your entire project for you to get paid, right? Or if you're gonna get cheated eventually, you don't have to get cheated after the completion of the entire project. So you will know the authenticity of your client in that first week or the second week itself. And if the client decided to run away after the third week or fourth week, at least you have gotten your payment for the first 2-3 weeks, right? So that's how you want to negotiate for freelance projects. So that's just one tip. So now let's go back to that third point. So what I meant by life is not a solo game is that um, let me give you the situation. You could be the best programmer or the best developer in this whole wide world. But if no one knows of your existence, then what's the point of being the best? You're not gonna get to use your skills, you're not gonna get to use your knowledge, right? It's only useful. It only matters or meaningful when you get to use all those skills and knowledge into something that portrays your talent, right? So in order for you to make use of those things, you need people. Okay, so I know that a lot of programmers, they came into this industry because they don't have to talk to people, right? I mean, I was one of the people. Okay, um I thought that, okay, if I come here I could just be with my laptop where I'm happy and I get to avoid people's the social interactions and so on. But boy, I was wrong. You can't go far without that skill at all, right? Now, let me reiterate again. You're gonna need different types of people to give you a chance, to give you some sort of money or funding or investments or whatever, um, for you to be able to make use of that skill. Okay, and for that you're gonna have to network. You're gonna have to join hackathon. You're gonna have to join some conference, workshops, and don't just join them and talk to people, get to know people. It's okay if you screw up, it's fine, no worries, just talk to people. And when you talk to those people, remember, you can always showcase your portfolio, you can ask for their experience, you can ask for contacts, so on and so on, right? From there itself you will be able to get some sort of opportunities for freelance if they like you. um, See, those contacts that I have made way back in 7 8 years ago has are still useful to me up until today. Those people that I've in contact with those many years ago, they still sometimes reach out to me when they have some freelance projects and they think that I'm the best person to do it. They will come to me, right? So it's not a wasteful effort. If you met someone and it didn't go anywhere, it's fine. It's fine. My suggestion would be, if you meet someone that you hit it off, you guys get to talk a lot about your hobbies, your personal interests, whatever, add them in LinkedIn. Keep your LinkedIn active. All right. You When you keep your LinkedIn active, people get more credibility towards you. Now, what I mean by that is, imagine that you really love your programming projects. You really love to do your own projects, and uh, you're just doing it for fun, right? Now, if you put those things in LinkedIn, and it doesn't matter if you get likes or not, it doesn't even matter at all. Just keep on putting it there, right? As long as you keep on putting it there, the algorithm is going to boost you and in one way or another. um, and people will get to see all those history of your post, right? From there they would know that you are someone authentic, you are someone who does programming for a living, for your hobby, and it's your passion. People can see that. And the second scenario that could happen is, some companies, they use they use headhunters to find you, right? And those headhunters normally use crawlers or some sort of bots to crawl through LinkedIn and Facebook to find for relevant projects that people do, so they can recruit you. One of my friend got recruited that way when he kept posting his projects in Facebook. All right, so it's possible. And the second thing is those recruiters, they will look at all those hashtags and they will try to find people through that. And I've honestly speaking, a lot of interviews that I've gone through, I've got it through LinkedIn. I just post a lot of my personal projects that I did in my GitHub, in my LinkedIn, with some humorous posts, or sometimes in a dumbed down version of that explanation. And some people like it. And I noticed that the more I post those things, the more recruiters reach out to me, right? So that's how you basically network. And the second thing is join communities. So the communities can be physical, or it could be through some sort of Discord. Like, I mean, this Crenovator is one of the communities. The second thing is you could also join other communities as well. Now, one community that I would suggest to you guys is something called Oxen.ai, right? So you guys can just Google it, Oxen AI Discord, and it's over here. All right. So whoever that's interested, you guys can join this Oxen.ai. So basically, they are an international community with a lot of researchers, engineers, developers, and even YouTubers are there that always love to talk about machine learning and AI, right? Every Friday, 1 a.m. Technically that's Saturday 1 a.m. They come together in a Zoom meeting call and they discuss about research papers. How cool is that, right? There's like a lot of people there as well, like sometimes 30, 40 people join, and there are people like PhD candidates from US universities, from some prestigious companies. There were even once a developer from Meta joined that talk as well. So you get to ask them questions, you get to know how they are talking, how do they present, what kind of words they use, their mannerisms, and so on. That's one of the biggest benefit that I've gotten by joining these kind of communities, right? Now, the third thing you can do is to teach back. Um, so I myself practice teaching in my companies to my juniors, to anyone that's actually interested in AI. So it doesn't have to be a teaching as in like a official class or something like that. You could always teach your peers, your colleagues, and so on. Now, why do I ask you to teach back? Is because um, when you gain those knowledge, and then when you teach back to others, you get to reinforce that knowledge for free. Plus, you are doing yourself a favor by letting other people ask you questions that would undermine your understandings. See, when you learn things on your own by yourself, from books or from blog posts or whatever, doesn't matter. Sometimes you can live, um, sometimes you can just uh, overlook certain concepts, and you think you may understand it, but you don't. It happened to me like a lot of times. I read books, I read linear algebra books, I read calculus books, I read machine learning books. Now, when I read this one linear algebra book, I still remember I was reading about this topic called subspaces, right? So we have these vector spaces, and then there's something called subspaces inside the vector spaces. And at first, I thought I understood it. I thought that the subspaces is just like if you have 3D, and then 2D and 1D are considered as subspaces, and they would be represented in two-dimensional or one-dimensional, which is not entirely wrong. But when you actually write those things, you want to write those things still in the 3D format, but with only two or one values inside those vectors. So those are what actually called subspaces, not the first understanding that I had. And I could only rectify this understanding when I was teaching back. When I was teaching, someone asked me a question that kind of put me in a very tough spot. But of course, when I don't know when I don't know how to answer that question, I told them that I will get back to them later. And when I come back home, I check that book again, and it turns out that my initial understanding was wrong, right? So that's how you get to rectify your mistakes when you teach people, and at the same time you are inspiring people, and you are sharing back, giving back to the community. So I don't see anything wrong with that as well. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the workplace environment and career growth. See, we talked a lot about ours, the difference between the startup and the difference between, between the startup and the corporate cultures, right? Now, let's talk about the task. How do you want to balance? And lastly, about your career growth, right? So, the task. See, in corporate, even sometimes in startup, it's very normal for them to hire you for this one particular role, but the task that they give you does not reflect the role that they hired you for. For example, they could hire you as an AI engineer, but the task is not anything related to AI at all. So it's quite common. You would be end up doing some data engineering or data science job. Now, you eventually you want to put a sort of like a um, boundary with that, right? Now, the one that always gives you task are your managers, correct? Now, if you feel like the task is not what you signed up for, you may voice it out, right? A lot of people that I know, uh, they just close their mouth, and they will take the task and they will just keep on doing it like that's how it's meant to be. And at the end of the day, if you notice, if you keep on doing that kind of unrelated task, you're gonna get daunted, you're gonna get bored, and there will be no career growth for you. Okay, because if you're an AI engineer and you're doing non-AI task, imagine you are going to another company for an interview and the person asks, what kind of projects have you done in the past? And when you look back, all the tasks that you have done are non-AI related. So how are you going to answer that question, right? So once in a while it's fine, right? Like if you get 5 AI projects and 1 non-AI projects, that's fine. But if you get 4 non-AI projects and only 1 AI project, that's not fine. So you're gonna have to put some sort of boundary. When your manager comes with those kind of tasks, tell him no, you hire someone else. I want to only do AI projects. But of course, talk to him or her in a nice way first. They are also humans. They might make mistakes. Um, it could be something unintentional, right? So you want to have a talk with your manager. If all else fail, then you're gonna have to see other ways to get out of that, right? So that's about task. Now about the balancing. um so what I mean by balancing is two things. The first is, you don't want to overpromise the task in the company. So one thing I notice with newcomers, or at least those fresh graduates, is that they tend to overpromise a lot. They tend to want to do a lot because they are so energetic and they think they can take on the whole world, and they want to obviously get on the good side of the manager or their colleagues, right? That would be a mistake. Try to take a task that you think you can handle within the time frame and leave a lot of wiggle room there. For example, if you think this one particular project can be finished within 1 week, ask for 2 weeks. Okay, the reason why I'm saying that is because it's in our nature to overestimate the task. Uh, the overestimate our ability. So what I mean by that is, um, when you look at that task, it might look like it can be finished within 1 week, but then when you do it, it's like peeling the layers of an onion, right? So the more difficulty starts to appear, and you're gonna end up giving up, and you're gonna end up burning out, and you're also gonna end up working after the working hours, which is not gonna be ideal at all for you in the long run. Once in a while it's fine, not a problem, but long run, no. So you're gonna want to balance those tasks that well. If you think that it's gonna take 1 week, ask for 2 weeks. If they ask you why, then you justify by saying that you just putting a wiggle room between those things, and you want to take more time to do that. If the manager insists no, 2 weeks is too much, then you guys can negotiate on 1.5 week or so. At least it's still higher than your initial estimate, right? So the second types of balancing that I wanted to tell you about is the work hours, right? um See, I had a friend last time who went missing for 1 whole year because he chose the wrong company. He went to this company and they made him work overtime with no pay, and they just put him under so many projects because everybody else was leaving, and he couldn't afford to leave because that was on his only income, and um, he had to do those projects. Now, what happened was, even after he had done a lot of those projects, the company didn't pay his salary, and they said that he have to finish this another project, only then they will have the money to pay his salary and so forth. So at the end, when he got out of the company didn't pay 2 or 3 months of his salary, right? So and he ended up working after working hours, and without pay, by the way, and even in the weekends a lot of times. So he just let go of all his social life, and he just completely immersed in that work. Now, lucky for him, he really loved the developments projects that he was doing, so he could cope. But I don't think that's for everyone, and I don't think anyone should do that in the first place, right? It takes you out of the game. It you would, sure, you might get good at your programming, but what's the point if your mental health is deteriorating, or if your social skill has gone down the drain, right? So you want to have some sort of balance. If your company is asking you to constantly work after work hours, then you might want to put a hard boundary there. Again, I'm not saying that you should um, you should be very rigid about it, like at 6:01 you want to go back. It's not like that. You can work until 6:15 or 6:10 once in a while, okay? But in most of the time, if it happens very frequently and without an OT pay, in an abusive way, then that's the cue for you to go out. Now, about the career growth, right? See, when you choose those tasks, make sure that you try and choose tasks that are pertaining to the skills that you want to acquire. If you work as a data scientist and you love to be a data scientist, there, try to take a task that pertains to data science only, right? You can do other things like data engineering or data analytics or other things, or automations or whatever, once in a while. That's fine, not an issue. You can always learn that as well, and it's always good for you to have multiple perspective. But in the long run, you want to have as many projects as you can in the field that you chose, because like I said, when you go to the next company, they're gonna ask you, right? And you would want to have all those. Now, for the last thing, what I would like to say is your CV. um, your CV has to be, I think I can show you guys my CV over here. I hope it's here. Yeah. So what I want to show you guys is certain parts. Okay. So obviously you need to have all this experience and whatever, but one of the most important part is achievement. Okay. So people are gonna look at that first. You want to put all uh, your most proudest achievement over here, okay? And then the rest of the things are pretty standard, skills and so forth. And you can also put your personal projects over here. So I've put in all my personal projects, all those things that you can find in my GitHub, but I've picked the most important ones, or the ones that I think the most impressive ones, and I put them here. And I also have the freelance projects over here. And okay, one more thing that I forgot to mention: when you guys do freelance projects, or even when you work in a startup company or what, if you had done a good job and you believe that you had done a good job, and you are on a friendly term with the C-level people or with someone, manager or whatever, ask them for an endorsement letter. So in my case here, I have an, oh my god, I don't have it. So I have an endorsement letter from the US company that I worked with. Perhaps it's somewhere. Let me check over here. Okay, I can't find it now. That's fine. So basically what you want is to ask the person to write you an endorsement letter or a recommendation letter so that you can use that letter to to um, to use in your next freelance project or even in the companies that you're looking for. Now, this would also increase your value so that you can negotiate a better salary, a better position, or whatever that you want, right? So that's one or another way for you to do that. And then, yeah, if you're using your tools or your publications, you might want to put that as well. Um, yeah, pretty much that's it, guys. Thank you a lot for staying with me at this hour. You guys have any questions? Hi, Andy. Just saw your message. Thanks. With the tech winter going on, I'm curious, are remote software engineering roles still in demand in Malaysia? Approach to hiring remote talent. Okay. Um, I can't speak for all companies, but I do notice this trend of coming back to the company, right? So, hiring remote workers has been on decline for some time. Even as for me, I tried looking for a lot of remote jobs, especially early this year, and because of some I guess it's also pertaining to some politics that's been happening around Asia for some time. There has been some lesser demand of looking into um, hiring remote jobs. But there are definitely some companies that are still hiring for remote jobs, and you should definitely look into it. Um, I would suggest you to look into LinkedIn jobs and the uh, the website that I've given you earlier, angel.co. So you guys can look into that. I believe that a lot of uh, remote jobs opportunities are available here. Then I have to log in. That's fine. So you guys can just register and go check it out. And one thing that I really like about this website is that it's super easy for you to apply for those jobs, because you just have to set up your profile once and just click apply, apply, apply. That's it. You don't have to fill up a bunch of form every time you apply for a company, right? So that's what one thing makes it easier. I've gotten like personally about 5 or 6 interviews from these companies, and one of those interviews were the US job that I was doing, right? I hope that answers your question, Andy. Anybody else have any question? I can see someone typing. Okay, not sure if the question is directed to me or directed to Andy. Uh, is the question directed to me, Drew? All right. So how do you consistently update your projects and manage your time with it? Okay, good question. Now, I was supposed to talk about that during the talk earlier, but I think I missed it. So luckily, you have asked that question to me. See, there's one trick that you guys can do, but of course, try to keep it down low. Don't try to bloat about this too much, because I'm I mean, whatever that I'm gonna tell you, it's not illegal or it's not against the law or anything at all. But it's just that I think it might ruffle some feathers, especially on managers or people above you, right? Now, what I'm trying to tell you is, see, when you are assigned to some project, and you're gonna have to implement something that is out of ordinary, let's say, or even something ordinary. Let's say you have to implement an LLM or some pre-trained model or AI or something that's already available out there in the industry. Now, they're gonna give you some time to learn about it, and then they're gonna give you some time to go and implement for that for the company, right? Now, during the learning period, what I would suggest to you is pick a small project that you can do, and that project you upload to your GitHub. Okay, and just make sure that the project that you're doing, that small project that you're doing, is not at all related to the company's use case. Okay, um, and then you once you uploaded that project into your GitHub, keep it aside. Now you go and finish up your company's task using that thing that you have just learned by making that small project of yours, and um, yeah, you do your company's job well, right? So once you have done that job and you have an extra time, come back to your GitHub and make that project proper. By what I mean by proper is you write your README, uh, reformat your code, or you can even expand that small projects that you did to something else. See, you have done two things at once. You have learned that skill both for your company and for yourself, and you now have showcased it. I can show you one example. See, the project that I've shown you guys earlier about the deep hierarchical classification, I didn't do this just out of the blue. Um, I was doing this for my previous startup company. So, long story short, back then we don't have a hierarchical model. What I mean by that is, you when you have a neural network, when you have an AI model, it cannot predict in a hierarchical fashion. Like, for example, it cannot tell you that this is a shirt, and then it cannot tell you after the shirt, this is a long sleeve shirt, or this is a polka dot shirt, or something like that. So it cannot give you that sequence. It can only tell you it's a shirt, or it's a polka dot shirt, or it's a long sleeve shirt, right? There's only one level. So the way we solve it is by using many different models. One model for the first levels, another, and then another few models for the second level, and so on. So in that way, when you have the first model determine that this is a skirt, the second model will take that prediction and determine that this is a long skirt or short skirt or a A-line skirt or something, and then the third model will be able to classify even further. um, so I needed a way to make them all into one single model. So I asked some time. Back then I was a senior engineer, so I asked some time from my CTO back then, and he said, "Okay, sure, take your time." I went and found some research papers, and this was the research paper that I found. And the thing about this research paper is that there was no open source implementation of it, meaning there's no code. There's only this paper. Now, when I studied this paper, I felt like, okay, this idea could work. This idea was awesome. And then I went and told about this idea to my CTO, and he said, "Sure, go ahead and implement it." Now, when I wanted to implement it, I have to implement the most basic prototype first, right? The MVP or the prototype. Once I have a working prototype, then only I can implement that for the use case of my company. And that's exactly what I did. I went and implemented the prototype. I put it in my GitHub over here, and because of that, now I got about some amount of stars. It's not much in the grand scheme of things, only 87, but at least I've got that out of some pet project that I've done. And not, I don't think so many people are using this project in the real world now, but at least I was the first implementation of this research paper. And until now, during interview, I still tell them about this implementation. Okay, so that's how you get to save some time. You do something for your company and take that time to learn and put them as your personal project, and then go to your company's use case. Okay, so you basically like solve the time management problem over here. I hope that answers your question. Okay, Any more question? Okay, if there's no more questions, then we can end the session here. No problem, Ru. Thanks so much for joining me at this night, guys. I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you guys soon. All right, see you. Bye.